The only way you can play any of them is on a home video system made by Atari.
So you think you're a video game fan? Well, put a quarter up, Arcade Rat. It's the video game years, and this is 1977.
1977 was truly an interesting time to be a gamer. Probably.
The trends, the culture, the toys, the flicks, the games. A truly remarkable year that gave us these burning questions. What was in the ball pit at Chuck E. Cheese?
Just a petri dish of children's crap everywhere.
Why was everything wood paneled?
My ultimate video game room, it would be just like this. Wood paneling everywhere. The entire room would be made of wood.
How could red dots be so realistic?
A power sweep. He fights through for the tackle. You pass. He blitzes. Intercepts. This is real competition.
Plus the spaceships that made arcades a hit.
Pew, pew, pew. And you know, who wouldn't want to play that?
And a leather company makes good. Because you love video games. These are the video game years, and this is 1977.
Insert coin. You're watching the most exciting game you will ever see on your TV set. Telstar by Coleco, with 3 different games. Telstar Tennis, with digital scoring, variable speeds. Telstar Hockey. Each player controls a goalie plus a forward on the other side. Oops, a goal.
The original Pong. This came out in 75. So between 75 and 77, a whole mess of Pong clones started coming out.
And suddenly everybody wanted to put out a dedicated console to a game.
You would buy a system, plunk down so much money, like actually quite a bit of money, $100, $200, and more likely than not, you were getting a Pong clone.
Oh, wow. Pong systems in the late 70s. You get so many different kinds. Christ.
They were the same game with different names, okay? Same game, same concept, different names. But they were all Pong.
Yeah, it's a theater of the mind.
Some popular variations include hockey, handball, tennis, and my personal favorite, AP Debate Club College Edition. Oh, that's a valid point. Well, allow me to retort.
And by this point, I think by 77, they're really squeezing blood from a stone with these Pong systems.
And they, you know, there were the light gun games that were, weak.
Yeah, hey kids, you want to get shot by a cop?
And the controllers were usually attached to the system, so they didn't have standalone controllers.
All of them, all these dedicated consoles had these, what the hell?
Oh, this was revolutionary, my friends. This is a controller, guys. Oh, yeah.
Now you kind of see why drugs were so prevalent, I think. I'm sticking by that.
See, I feel like these Pong consoles were just as much like a fashion statement as they were a preference in game. Because you could get the hot orange, or you could go for something a little bit more subdued. A little more wood grain. A little bit of wood grain.
Yes, because everything was wood grain back in the 70s.
Because when you think high quality electronics, you think it must be made of wood.
And you gotta love the wood grain on these things, man. All the consoles. I love the consoles of the 70s with the wood grain. It's so slick and so nice.
To match their wood grain walls, their wood grain tables.
The wood colored television.
Yes, because everybody wanted their house to look like a forest.
You had, let's see, Odyssey was a big company. You had APF, had a lot, and Coleco had a ton of them.
Coleco introduced a dedicated game console known as the Telstar.
A game you play yourself. Telstar handball, tennis, hockey. All 3 at an exciting low price. For great family fun, hitch your TV to a Telstar by Coleco.
Now, funny thing about Coleco, the actual name stands for Connecticut Leather Company. That's right, back in the 50s when Coleco started, they basically manufactured shoe leather, and then they went on to do like pool molding and plastics for swimming pools.
Them getting into video games was really just a matter of natural progression.
And later known for the Cabbage Patch Kids, little known fact.
Yes.
Atari, naturally, was pushing the pack, even with its dedicated consoles. It was coming up with, you know, alternatives to Pong, like honest-to-God alternatives.
This was a cool one. Look at this camera. The stunt cycle by Atari.
rubber grips. This is all you did. You go faster or slower. Faster, slower. Very complex.
No, that's not all
What?
you did.
What?
Look, you could be a stunt cyclist,
What?
or a drag racer, or you could do some motocross, or enduro, which I don't think is actually a thing, but I see that word on a lot of 70s, games.
Yeah, kind of a depressing time.
Player 1.
So Pizza Time Theater was created in the late 70s by Nolan Bushnell.
And Nolan Bushnell, knowing that he wanted to build up the marketplace for kids and video games, decided, well, it's pizza, animatronic mice, and other creatures, and arcade games. It was a perfect combination.
Pizza, video games, tickets, tokens, skee-ball.
All in the same place. Everything right there under one roof for the family.
Games and all kinds of creatures. For a taste of Pizza Time Theater.
Hitting the frog with the rubber mallet.
It's possible. An entire economy based around Super Balls started right then.
The arcade games were more difficult there. Try playing Breakout when the arcade stick is all lubed up with pizza grease.
One thing I remember about Chuck E. Cheese was that they had the main door for the adults, and then they had the little kitty mouse type door right next to it where you get on your knees and crawl on in, and you always see the fat kid struggling to get into that door, and it was awesome. You just, took some of the pizza grease, lubed them up, and then kicked his keister right into the door.
Or you can lube them up with that fluid that accumulated in the ball pits.
Yeah, which was usually piss and spit.
Kids, those are not Raisinets in the ball pit.
Chuck E. Cheese, who'd have thought that?
A spokes being for your restaurant, a giant rat.
So that rat we all know and love, created by the Atari guy, Bushnell.
The health code violations alone.
Nolan Bushnell was a big fan of Disney, which is probably why he paid homage to it by making the restaurant's mascot a giant rat.
Can you think of the size of the turds? Are they called turds or are they pellets?
With a bunch of banjo-playing animals with him.
Oh yeah.
And I think that would lead to what became the band, which is actually now gone from the current Chuck E. Cheese.
Oh.
Sadly.
Some Chuck E. Cheese trivia for everyone.
Approximately every 12 minutes, the characters perform original 4 to 5 minute cabaret-like presentations drawn from a library of approximately 250 programs.
And hang out with your friends while some creepy mice sang terrible songs to you.
Whenever, they need maintenance, and so the arms and stuff are falling off. They look like zombie animatronics.
People were more easily amused then. This is the decade that gave us the pet rock.
Arcades were kind of seedy and gross, and
mullet-wearing thugs.
I'm very, very glad that they decided to give children a place to actually play arcades that didn't involve possibly being molested.
Dorks were mean in the 70s. They're all lining up, greasy-faced.
They were associated with criminals and punks and teenagers and
rampant drug use and sex and alcohol and
cocaine, motorcycle gangs, cigarette burns. That's what arcades were then.
And now, Pat Contry presents The Pop Culture of 1977.
Pat Contry here with the pop culture that inspired video games in 1977. The Amazing Spider-Man! Not so amazing. The Super Friends cartoon still going strong. This year, we met the Wonder Twins. Yeah.
I'm Ron Howard. This is Grand Theft Auto.
And Grand Theft Auto, directed by Ron Howard. A movie where the hero beats up prostitutes and old women for their pocket change. Or not.
Grand Theft Auto is a love story. With cars.
And those were the pop culture moments of 1977 that inspired video games. Remember, there's other things in the world besides video games. They're just less important.
Try again.
Yeah, nobody remembers the RCA Studio II.
No.
I wouldn't be surprised if this system didn't sell badly and get discontinued.
So it's a collectible kind of, but not really, because nobody wants it.
Still nobody wants it.
Who has this thing?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, the RCA Studio II. No, it's not an intercom you'd find in a hospital. This is a game console.
Now, unlike dedicated consoles, this system was important because it used cartridges. It also didn't have those goofy built-in controllers like some of the dedicated consoles. It was the controller itself. And that'd be fine, except it forced you to sit practically on the lap of the other player, and my friend has dander.
It was actually a cartridge system that came out before the Atari VCS.
Oh, RCA, the people who made the television.
Look at these game cards with graphics that look like something out of either an airline safety card or a commercial for an art school from 1984.
And little known fact about the RCA Studio II is that little dog listening to the phonograph machine, that's what powers the RCA Studio.
Now that makes sense.
Yes.
I wonder why it didn't sell very well.
Told you.
I'm sorry, I'm hung up on how out of their way they went to make this thing look incredibly boring. It's beige. I mean, the script is not exciting. Home TV programmer? I mean, what does that mean?
It's got a clear button. I don't know another console has a clear button on it.
I don't know what that means. And then, I mean, there's these two little poison spikes that you can impale your hands on.
Look at these electrified little spikes right here.
I mean, I'm sure they fit the cartridge, but it just looks dangerous.
It came out at a bad time. It didn't last much past the first year.
Oh. Have you ever heard of the RCA Studio I?
No.
That was a clock radio from 1957, I think. Where's the Studio I?
The Studio I played an awesome game called Calculations. That's the game the Studio I played. Edition Adventures.
Well, they thought it would sell really well because of the public's clamoring for only black and white.
It didn't help that the Studio II was only black and white.
There was no color on this system.
No, just like the eyes of Michael Jackson. There's no color.
Even though in 77, not many people had color TV still, but you wanted to try to at least do the color. Some of the Pong systems supported color.
Black and white not being a racial thing. Being that there were no colors at all.
This is ridiculous. I think everyone's grandma has this underneath some old stereo in some dusty room in their house.
You win. Somewhere in space, this may all be happening right now.
Arguably the greatest movie which started the greatest franchise of all time, and that would be Star Trek. I swear to God.
Star Wars.
I love Star Wars!
So, yeah, there was that Star Wars thing.
So it's 1977, Star Wars comes out, I'm -2 years old.
Star Wars, nothing but Star Wars.
Give me the Star Wars, don't let them in.
I saved the princess.
Yeah, I never really got into Star Wars, but I'm sure it was pretty cool when it came out.
I think Star Wars, I really believe, made sci-fi cool. It made it cool to be a sci-fi geek.
Sup, ladies?
Finally, you can be a nerd and be accepted in the eyes of the general public.
Like it was the cool thing to do to like nerdy things like Star Wars.
Come out of your closets, nerds. Come on. Whoa. Wait. You can leave that Dungeons and Dragons in there. That's the game of the devil.
George Lucas retained the rights for all licensing properties of Star Wars, which was like never done because Fox didn't think this movie was gonna do too great. So like, yeah, whatever, dude, we'll give him the rights, and he made a ton of money.
I remember Star Wars tours being some of my favorite of the early 80s.
It was crazy. It was crazy stupid. Like, I mean, there was a toy for everything. Like even the most obscure, minuscule figure in the cantina, there was a toy for.
Star Wars!
Before the late 70s, most video games were, well, just Pong. All of a sudden now, space shooters.
Space Pong.
Who, when they saw the Millennium Falcon get away from the Death Star with the pew 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 and the poof poof poof, you know, who wouldn't want to play that?
Most of the video games in the late 70s, early 80s
were space-based.
Were space-based.
space-themed video games are the easiest things to make at the time.
Yep.
It was like white blips or colored blips on a black background. And the black background comes standard.
Wow, space sci-fi, that's awesome. Let's make as many video games as we can based on that concept.
Space Invaders. Space Invaders.
Defender, Galaxian, Asteroids.
If there had never been Star Wars, then there probably would never have been games with Space Marines, which means there would be no Doom or no Halo, which would mean that I wouldn't be getting my ass handed to me by 12-year-olds on the internet.
Not to mention the Star Wars arcade game, which came much later but was fantastic. You know, one of the first truly good examples of a movie tie-in video game.
And the great voice samples in the game.
I mean, how many people on the planet say that they've influenced that many people on the planet? George Lucas, Adolf Hitler, Michael Irving. The list is short and sweet.
What?
There have been remakes and a prequel trilogy, but I pretend those don't exist.
No. Such a great time in human history when people thought that he could, you know, make good movies by himself.
And I think it's kind of funny that he's a fat too. You're probably not going to use that part. I shouldn't say things like that.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that he was competent at making movies.
And then he was able to go on and create Howard the Duck.
One of the greatest films of all time.
How can you trust him to ever make something completely on his own after that? I seriously, I don't get it.
Can we go back in time and make Star Wars not have happened?
Next level.
And now Rue presents the gaming innovations of 1977.
Hello, this is Rue with the gaming innovation of 1977. What cutting-edge technology was introduced to the world and changed the face of gaming forever? The dual-screen arcade cabinet. Subs, made by Atari in 1977, marked the first time that players could compete against each other with their own unique perspective on the action. In this case, each person would control their own sub and use sonar to locate and destroy their opponent before they could in turn be destroyed. This opened up a whole host of opportunities in the field of competitive multiplayer games, not to mention single-player games. Thus, a brave new video gaming world was born. From Cruisin' USA to Counter-Strike to the Nintendo DS, the effect can be seen across all gaming platforms. Well, I'll see you again in 1978, and remember, it's not just nostalgia, it's science.
Power up. Only Atari makes the world's most popular home video games. The only Space Invaders. The only Asteroids. The only Pac-Man. The only Missile Command. And now, the only Defender. And the only way you can play any of them is on a home video system made by Atari. Have you played Atari today?
And of course, probably the biggest video game related event of 1977 would be
the Atari. Hold it up.
Atari VCS. The VCS, Video Computer System, later renamed the 2600.
I didn't play the Atari 2600 too much.
Animal!
The beginning of the video game industry as we know it.
We salute you, sir.
It actually came packaged with a game. Combat.
And unlike the other Pac-Man that came out a couple years later, Pac-Man, combat is actually still really fun.
And the fact that it still can keep your interest, you know, to this day, really speaks something about the creativity that went to a lot of the games back then.
Atari.
You know, this actually retailed around $200 at the time.
That's a lot of money.
At the time, that's a ton of money. It's like, what, $400 now? I'm no scientist.
Inflation adjusted, about $700. And yes, I looked that up.
Sexy. Extreme 70s.
I'm gonna say it's a little too sexy.
Too sexy?
A little too sexy.
The switches. Color or black and white. A or B difficulty. Game select. Game reset.
And on this side, there's a switch to change it to HD.
I mean, you might see me taking this little beauty out to dinner one day, and don't get jealous.
weirding me out over here.
A little licking.
Why would you take mine out? Dude, you actually just licked my freaking Atari.
Save on the Atari video game and get hours of fun for the whole family. Atari comes complete with the exciting combat cartridge.
I quit soccer to play Atari.
No other company offers you as many different video game cartridges as Atari.
There was a ton of Atari 2600 versions, from like the Vader to this heavy six switcher.
That's the Vader.
To the Junior.
The Junior.
Way too many.
This was the system to coin the term joystick, which was good because before that point they were called enjoyment input devices.
Yeah, Atari came up with this idea, this little thing, joystick. Brilliant. They made the term joystick a household name.
The controller was just really cool. It was genius. It was joystick and a button. That's it.
You had all sorts of crazy contraptions controlling games. There wasn't really much of a standard. You had all manner of knobs and buttons and cell phone looking things. I still don't get.
Hello?
But this thing, anyone can pick this up.
And frankly, I hate them because they were the first time controllers were biased against a lefty. They were designed to be held in the right hand with the action button here. If you're a lefty, you kind of got to get this claw thing going on.
This was like the Wii for the 70s. Dumb it down.
They were also removable, had longer cords than anything that came prior, such as some of the oddities.
I know, joystick, right? And smash cut to dick joke in 3, 2, 1.
There you go. You play with your joystick. Your mom comes in. You go, "Hey, you're playing with your joystick," and then I'm like, "No, I'm not, Mom."
Well, my guess is that Nolan Bushnell was in his hot tub, sniffing some crack, something started to float up. He goes, "Hey, that's my joystick." That's what we're naming those damn controllers.
That's why it was so hard and rigid.
Yes.
Joystick. You get joy from the stick.
Only can be thought of when sniffing a whole table full of Coke.
Let's come up with a joystick.
One time my mom walked in on me when I was...
One button? You know, nowadays you couldn't imagine it, but back then, after Pong, when you had no buttons, one button was huge!
Worked in the 70s and the early 80s, but eventually we need our 16 button mega controllers.
Ah! That's why you're the guy who makes the goofy videos and I'm just the sidekick.
You would see, eventually, if that stagnant image was there for an extended period of time and you turned your TV off, you would still see those lines in, hence burn in. So the Atari fixed that issue by changing the colors on the screen after you pause it for a little bit.
Yeah, you didn't want to watch Dukes of Hazzard and then see a Pong paddle on the right side of the screen all the time.
No.
So the great thing about the 2600, for the first time, you could bring the arcade experience home! Space Invaders! Pole Position! Defender!
Obviously, none of the games that came with it that year in '77, because they were all kind of crappy. I mean, fun with numbers, what's that?
When this guy came out, it actually blew the Fairchild out of the water.
Channel F, the one with all the fun. The Fairchild Video Entertainment System at your larger JCPenney. The home entertainment system that never gets old. Plug in a new video cart and change the fun. Play tic-tac-toe, shooting gallery, or just doodle. Switch video carts and play Desert Fox. Switch again, it's blackjack. Or play the 2 built-in games, Pro Hockey or Tennis Champ.
The Fairchild Channel F was the first console the year previous to have cartridges.
Right here, the Fairchild F, very first system to actually have interchangeable, programmable 8-tracks.
You would think it's an 8-track tape.
No.
But it's not. It's a video game cartridge and I have no idea how it actually functions. Ah!
The Atari VCS, same way. You have the cartridges, you buy those, and you can finally get away from just having 6 versions of Pong on this dedicated console.
You know, you can play different games, you know, like 4 and 12.
And the very first cartridge, number 1, Fairchild 1. This is the first video game cartridge.
Numero uno.
So although the Atari was not the first game cartridge system to come to market, it had a lot of advantages over the Fairchild Channel F. One was the color palette. The Channel F was awful.
Ow.
That's the sound of the very first video game cartridge going into the very first video game cartridge hole.
it's violating the machine.
Obviously, the Atari is very primitive by today's standards, but at the time, it was an amazing system, and I have fond memories of the Atari 2600.
The Atari 2600 is still easily one of my favorite systems to play and collect for. I mean, the cartridges are only really like $1 for most of them.
This is what made video gaming less niche and more of a household name.
My earliest video game memories are of the Atari 2600, so it will always hold a special place in this guy's heart.
I mean, you don't see any Fairchild Channel F shirts being given out at E3. No, 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 no. You don't see Pat the NES punk throwing a mini hissy fit because he missed out on grabbing the Magnavox Odyssey throwback shirt. No, 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 no. Only the Atari shirts. The red Atari shirts. Yes, did I mention that? I am better at catching shirts than Pat.
High score.
We challenged hotshot Garland Dwyer with a Mattel Electronics baseball game.
You are on.
Inside, a tiny thinking computer plays like a team of pros. The computer fires a fastball.
Hey, who's in there?
Electronic baseball, one of 9 sports games from the #1 name, Mattel Electronics.
At this time, integrated chips became cheaper and more abundant, so new companies joined into the electronic gaming craze, like Milton Bradley and Mattel.
It was the integrated chip. That helped spur things up.
It's an integrated chip.
When electronics first started, computers and so forth, you had these big bulky vacuum tubes. You know, and then eventually you moved on to transistors, which were also great. But the integrated circuit was very important. I mean, it was developed in the 50s, right? But by the time the 70s came along, it was actually getting cheap enough to stick in whatever the hell you wanted. Calculators and watches and video games.
Mattel used to just make toys, Milton Bradley made board games, and now they're making tiny electronic LED games, or LCD games, that everyone loved.
Everyone loved then, but if you were to play them now, you'd probably hate them.
Oh, oh God, yeah.
So, I mean, you had your video game companies, your electronics companies, kind of the bigger electronics going into home video game consoles like Fairchild and Magnavox and et cetera, et cetera. But you had the toy companies that felt they could handle the handheld market. So you had Mattel come out with these little LED games.
So what we have here are the Mattel Standalone games. Soccer, auto race to start.
Now, Mattel dipping their toe in the video game waters was important because of course it would eventually lead to the NES smash hit Barbie in 1991.
And the big one in 77, football.
Come on, Red Dot, score a goal. What am I doing?
Football, baseball, lots of games like that. They were simple, but you know what? They were fun and became very popular because of it.
And basically what it was just a little red dot going across the screen, and I mean, it's kind of primitive, but it's pretty cool at the time.
These are more complicated than a lot of the Pong clones that were being sold to people's homes. I mean, they had multiple blips on the screen, some AI.
I hated sports when I was a kid, but my jockey uncle had football, and it was still awesome because you know what it is? It's Mattel's LED Avoidance is basically the name of the game.
You really had to be really creative to see the players on the field. It certainly was no Madden.
The first electronic football games like these were for only one player.
And run.
But something was missing.
Can I play? Wait your turn.
A power sweep. He fights through for the tackle. You pass. He blitzes. Intercepts.
This is real competition.
Huh? Is it Game Boy yet? Bah.
And that case design is the exact same as the one for basketball and largely the same as the one for hockey. Like the Pong consoles, the problems with these is you do eventually run out of things you can do with LEDs and buttons.
They're like, oh, electronic football, red dots moving on a grid.
I'm done.
I mean, I remember people that really didn't give a crap about games but had at least one of these lying around the house. And part of the allure is that they're portable, so you could play them on the go.
See, I'm up 4-2 here in this game. I can't even tell when I scored a goal.
Well, it's all about the brightness of the different LEDs. You really have to be able to tell which one is your man.
Still a handheld, right?
Still a handheld.
And kind of fit in a pocket if you had a really big pocket.
These largely paved the way for the Tiger handhelds of the 80s and 90s, of the Coleco mini arcades, and were probably a big inspiration in the creation of the Nintendo Game & Watches. These were your first portable handheld systems.
Paved the way for, you know, Game Boy, Game Gear, the Lynx, DS.
I mean, the list could literally go on.
I think I just got a red card.
Is it Game Boy yet? Yeah.
Try again.
And now Pixel Dan presents the toys of 1977.
Hey, I'm Pixel Dan, and these are the other toys of 1977.
It's Pulsar, the ultimate man of adventure. You energize his heart, lungs, and body fluid into pulsating action.
We had action figures like Pulsar, who is this crazy man who you could see through his body and all his inner workings and his organs and blood flow, and wow, disgusting, but highly popular.
This is a slime monster. The slime runs out of his mouth.
The introduction of slime. This became a staple in the world of action figures, and 1977 gave us our first taste.
The winner gets the monster. The loser has to clean up.
Oh, yuck.
Star Wars figures. R2-D2. Chewbacca, Luke, and Princess Leia. They're the Star Wars early bird set of figures. These action figures are not yet available.
Well, Kenner was set to release their brand new line of Star Wars action figures that same year in 1977. But the problem was they did not have the toys ready in time to hit Christmas that year. So what did they do? Well, something kind of ingenious. They started the early bird certificate. Basically what that meant was parents who were out Christmas shopping could buy an empty box. Yes, an empty box that had the Star Wars logo on it with this little piece of paper inside that said, "We promise to send you the first 4 figures after Christmas when they're ready to ship." And you know what? It worked.
Early bird certificate package. New from Kenner.
I'm Pixel Dan, and that's the other toys of 1977.
Game over.
Introducing Apple II, the easy-to-operate home computer. Just hook it up to your TV to create dazzling color displays. Or you can balance your checkbook. Kids can teach themselves arithmetic. Or the family can invent their own Pong games. The possibilities are endless. It's called Apple II, the personal computer.
The Apple II was released at the West Coast Computer Fair in 1977 by Atari alumni Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs.
When he was getting ready to release the Apple II, he actually went to Nolan Bushnell and asked for funding if they would back his company to bring out this computer, and Atari and Nolan Bushnell said no. Probably not a good decision looking back now.
These things were everywhere, and they were great. They were the workhorses of the, educational computer industry for all of the 80s and honestly a good chunk of the 90s.
This was an important moment, not only for video games and PCs, but for education as well.
The Apple II, obviously, I thought was a great product. I remember growing up in school and playing a lot of it.
Between elementary school and middle school, which is kind of like a long span. You think 8 years, the same damn computer at the school.
And that computer was there before and after that,
yes.
too.
Yes.
But of all these influences, few are more positive than the Apple II, the computer that's used by more schools than any other. It's one influence parents even encourage at home.
Mom, going to practice. Mom?
But we warn you, like many things a kid can pick up in school, it can be contagious.
Back in my day, we didn't use computers. We used rocks and wood. Mm-hmm. That's how we did our computing.
Pretty much.
Steve Wozniak's pretty much a genius, I think.
Wozniak?
Yeah.
Steve Jobs, thank you guys.
Thank you, Steve Jobs, for inventing the Apple II.
Wow.
Rest in peace, Steve Jobs. I still think computers are a fad, though.
Apple becomes a huge success, revolutionizes music players and computers and all that good stuff. Atari ends up publishing Dragon Ball Z fighting games.
There was the Apple II, the Apple IIe, the IIc, and the 2GS, but most people stopped at the 2E, and they kept at the 2E until they hit the mid-90s and they needed a PC.
Have you ever seen the original Apple logo? It's ugly.
So there was no Apple II cult of consumerism back then?
I don't believe so.
Young Steve Jobs was a lieutenant back in the Air Force in the 1930s when the Roswell crash occurred. Now, not many people know this. There were actually 2 downed craft, and then 1 still hovering.
Steve Jobs worked for Atari before going to Apple, and Steve Wozniak actually worked on the Breakout game for Atari. So they really had a kind of a gamer's mindset when they were making the Apple II.
Space Quest series got its start on there. King's Quest got its start on there.
Sierra.
Sierra got their entire start on the Apple II with Mystery House. Beneath Apple Manor was one of the first really great roguelikes on the system. Rogue got its start on there.
Lode Runner, Castle Wolfenstein, Robotron.
Prince of Persia, and things of this nature.
No wonder I almost flunked grade school.
You know, I really love the ones, love is a strong word. I really hated the ones where you're in a room and you had to get out and you basically had to type in the directions. You know, you're in a dark room, you have a knife, what do you do? And I just could not use my imagination to figure out anything, basically.
You had a lot of the arcade games released on the 2E, the early ones like Frogger, correct?
You did. You had Frogger. Dig Dug. I remember my grandparents had Dig Dug.
Gold Rush, Oregon Trail, King's Quest.
Oregon Trail, you can't go wrong with Oregon
Can't go
Trail.
wrong with
But
Oregon
you know
Trail.
something, I sucked at the game. I'll admit it right here.
MECC got their name made on the Apple II. They were responsible for such hits as Odell Lake, Oregon Trail, which everyone knows and loves. If you've ever died of dysentery, you probably did it on the Apple II.
And it was fun learning about dysentery and drowning in rivers in the 3rd grade.
Can you imagine a generation of students completely unaware of the dangers of dysentery?
And all I would play was Oregon Trail and the damn thing. I never played another game on the Apple II except
There were
Oregon Trail.
there were over 800 games for that system, and yes, I only played Oregon Trail.
If you had an Apple II, the likelihood of you having legit copies of software just sitting in your bin was slim to none.
I think there's a very good possibility that it is true. In fact, I know it's true. It's true.
My grandparents, unknowingly, were huge criminals in the 80s because they just had pirated software everywhere.
So Apple, thank you for software piracy.
And that, in a nutshell, is why we protest Wall Street.
What are you babbling about?
Continue.
Electronics is changing so rapidly. And with each change in electronics, it brings something new. So this is not a passing fad.
What is a fad is the kind of games that people like to play.
The first video game crash was not 1983/84.
Nope.
It was 1977.
Wow.
Yes.
Tell me more, John.
Well,
The crash of 77 doesn't really get the props it deserves for almost taking down the video game industry.
You still hear the crying in the streets.
The problem with 83 was that you had just a giant glut of really crappy games on the market, whereas in 77, you had a glut of pretty crappy consoles.
So the holiday season, end of 77, what are you gonna buy your kids? You got the Studio II. You have a ton of Pong systems and clones on the market, but you're about to get beaten down.
Cartridge-based systems just came out with the Fairchild F in 76. Almost everything else was just its own console with its own set of games, and you played those games, like however many there were, half a dozen, and then that's it. Go buy the next console for $200.
When everybody and their mom is making a Pong clone, eventually the market's gonna crash on them. So, you know, Mom, why were you making Pong clones? You contributed to this.
When the entire video game market crashes, that's too much Pong.
So, with the Pong clones just glutting up the markets, people wanted something different.
And by the time Christmas of 77 comes along, they are marked down heavily to get them out of the stores.
Coleco actually missed the Christmas season with their new version of the Telstar and stopped that, decided to also go the route of handheld games.
so Coleco at that point pulled out of the console business and went right into handhelds up until ColecoVision.
What you have is really a lot of these more dedicated single handheld systems. I don't think people are ready to buy into consoles yet. And you also got to think, parents are buying these for kids. Color TVs are a fairly new luxury. They don't really want to share the TV.
So with the rise of the handheld games, the market started to crash a little bit.
Okay, in '76 you had Coleco, you had Atari, you had Magnavox, APF, Sears, Walmart, Microsoft, Google. Okay, I think I'm wrong on a few of those, but you get the point. Too many freaking systems.
Soon after the video game crash in '77, the marketplace started to clear out.
The RCA didn't survive. The Fairchild, Channel F, didn't survive.
There was one Fairchild Channel F, and then another one.
And you can see why people would want to get the cheaper, more portable, and probably a little bit more innovative by that point game than pay the same damn thing over and over from 10 different companies.
The video game crash of '77 pretty much left the marketplace with just handheld electronic games and the new Atari VCS.
The Atari 2600 didn't make money in its first few years out.
The Atari 2600, still fairly new, and unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of arcade games out yet that can be featured on the system, so it didn't really catch on yet.
And at the end of the day, it was Atari that actually came out.
If you do not get a strike, bowl your second ball. If you knock down the remaining pins, you get a spare and hear the spare song. That's why these beat out things like the Atari 2600 in '77.
Because they had songs.
The Atari 2600 has no spare song. The Bolatronic, it's got a spare song.
So by the end of the year, you only had Atari and Magnavox that were willing to tough it out and continue producing consoles until the next crash came along.
That would start changing the world of games forever.
Blow everybody's mind.
And then soon it was 1978.
Coming up next on the video game years, 1978.
Something that was going to take the world by storm in Space Invaders.
It became a phenomenon in Japan.
Just by saying the name, you say so much.
It's a tongue twister. Bally Professional Arcade Home System.
Step right up. Come one, come all. Be amazed by the Bally Professional Arcade.
Simon.
Simon. Red, blue, green, red. You guys know what I'm talking about.
Atari VCS. Meet your competition.